in blue, and it is under the general plan designated as the West Beale Street growth area. The road here in the middle is West Beale Street, and the orange line at the top is the coming high-speed interchange between US 93 and the I-40. It is this interchange that gives the impetus and the opportunity to redevelop this area.
So our client is the City of Kingman's Economic Development Department, and to better understand our project, I'll introduce to you what is coming. So ADOT is currently constructing a new interchange between the US Route 93 and Interstate 40. This new interchange will reroute through traffic away from the downtown Kingman area, and this creates uncertainty for the Kingman economic development, specifically the tourism industry, which is built around Route 66 and West Beale Street. So this interchange is expected for completion in 2027. The city brought us in to analyze that impact and to create recommendations to help better bring travelers back into Kingman. So our three goals going into this were to strengthen the interstate to downtown connection, preserve historic Route 66 history, and capture interest and attract residents off the freeways and back into Kingman. So to get there, we conducted an existing condition assessment, a land use assessment, a peer cities review, and asset inventory, and a full public engagement campaign. This culminated in a phased vision framework and a set of recommendations to give the city.
To begin the brainstorming potential strategies for the revitalization of West Beale Street, we analyzed 4 peer communities that have conditions similar to Kingman. These 4 cities are Williams, Arizona, Wickenburg, Arizona, Grants, New Mexico, and Boulder City, Nevada. These case studies focus on cities that are in the Southwest that have historic downtowns and have had freeway diversions due to new freeway projects. Through common themes, we discovered potential strategies that can be implemented in Kingman. These strategies include preservation of historic buildings and unique character, streetscape improvements to enhance walkability and safety, and making use of nearby attractions such as outdoor recreation.
West Beale Street is currently a 5-lane arterial and serves a dual purpose of serving regional traffic and local traffic needs. As you can see here in the aerial imagery, there are numerous uncontrolled intersections and turning conflicts, which can make it difficult to access local businesses, and also a lack of pedestrian crossings and a sidewalk that's close to heavy traffic, including trucks. And from a land use perspective, there are several vacant lots along the corridor that can be put to better use. Most of it is currently zoned there in pink as a commercial, which allows a higher intensity of development than is there currently, including apartments. So it's important to stimulate growth through other means than just rezoning.
Another part of our existing conditions analysis was an inventory of the area's parks and recreation facilities. So again, in blue is the West Beale Street growth area, and all the points and shapes around there are parks, trailheads, things like that. So shown in the yellow lines, those are all the trails in the area that go through desert, terrain, and mountains. And all these things put the corridor in, that yellow highlighted area, that land is owned by the Federal Bureau of Land Management, which is a federal agency in charge of land conservation and resource management. So they manage all those trails to the south, and then the city manages all the trails to the north. And all these features put the corridor in a really unique position because this is something that the city could use to create a hub for outdoor recreation to draw in more travelers. There's a lot of unique attractions like mountain bike trails with a wide range of difficulties from very beginner to expert black diamond, and there's even a wall set up for sport climbing.
To better understand the existing conditions along the corridor, we conducted a site visit utilizing both photo observations as well as photo documentation. These observations documented traffic patterns, roadway conditions, land use, and access to nearby amenities. Traffic congestion was observed near key access points, where higher volumes and turning movements contribute to traffic delays. Roadway conditions in several areas include uneven pavement, potholes, affecting travel experience as well as maintenance needs. Land use consists of a mix of business types, along with vacant parcels that creates gaps within development patterns. These underutilized parcels present opportunities for future infill development within the area. Trailheads near the corridor were identified as existing assets. However, signage and visibility from the roadway remain limited. This may affect awareness of biking and hiking opportunities in the area, as well as access to these amenities.
On the same day as our site visit, we held our in-person public engagement at Kingman Comic-Con in their downtown. And in that afternoon, we had about 45 visitors with these boards set up at the entrance. This first one is a map of the study area that we used to introduce people to the project, and participants were given a green and red sticker that they could place on specific locations with their likes and dislikes to show opportunities and constraints. So they pointed out those road conditions, the traffic, the potholes, and they also pointed out some places where additional housing might be needed or services for the residents there. And these other two boards, these activities, were to get people's preferences on the built environment. So this one, the yellow urban character vision, showed different building types with different looks and feels. So there was a 50s retro style, a Western theme, and then a more dense historic downtown feel. And then different street types. There was a narrow pedestrian-focused street, a mix of transportation types, a little bit bigger, and then a very wide car-focused road, kind of similar to the existing condition today. So participants were given a dot that they would place on whichever one they liked the most. And overall, what we heard a lot was people wanted improvements to road safety. It's pretty dangerous there right now. They wanted it to be safer to drive, walk, and bike through the area. They wanted any new development to be they wanted the area to become a place for people, a place that they can go and spend time in rather than just pass through. And lastly, they wanted any new development in the area to reflect Kingman's specific identity and history.
To better understand community perspectives, we conducted an online survey using Qualtrics to gather input from Kingman travelers and residents. The survey was open from March 6th to March 31st and received a total of 1,262 responses, which is a very high level of participation, especially for a town like Kingman that has only around 36,000 residents. Questions were organized into 4 themes, including demographics, mode choice, identity, and future preferences, in addition to an open-ended question at the end of the survey. For identity, Route 66 in the downtown area were most frequently identified, along with festivals and outdoor recreation. For future preferences, respondents showed interest in more shops and restaurants and improvements to walkability, as well as lighting, shade, and safer crossing. Responses about the interchange reflected a range of perspectives, including expected changes to traffic patterns and impacts on downtown activity as well as tourism.
Thank you. To move West Beale Street closer towards the desired extension of downtown-like development, we propose the following strategies. The first is to increase signage and wayfinding to trailheads in the area to alert residents and travelers to their location, as well as increasing the amenities at the trailheads to make them more appealing. The second is to support and attract unique businesses into the area to increase its desirability and encourage people to spend time and visit there. The third recommendation calls for a traffic count study to be done on West Beale Street after the completion and the opening of the interchange. We predict that there are 2 likely scenarios for this. The first, in which traffic patterns remain relatively unchanged, and the second, in which traffic patterns along West Beale Street actually decrease. Under that second scenario, we recommend that the city sit down and begin discussing reconfiguring the road to match its newer usage, as well as entering into discussions with ADOT about the future of its right-of-way. The fourth and final recommendation calls to redevelop the area into a higher density to align with the growth area designation. To begin with, we recommend implementing economic incentives for infill development to build up to the current zoning maximums. Then, implementation of a zoning overlay to allow or require higher density development, which could then provide a basis to rezone the area into a higher density, whether that be under the current residential and commercial designations, or ideally into a downtown district.
To bring these recommendations to life, we've organized implementation into 4 phases tied to the completion of the I-40 US 93 interchange. The first phase takes place before the interchange is even complete. The city can start by branding West Beale Street by giving it a name, an identity, and a visual presence to the corridor. Small, low-cost improvements, such as murals, facade improvements, and wayfinding signage, can immediately make the area feel like a better place. From there, it's critical to engage property owners, especially property owners that own vacant lots that have West Beale Street frontage, and start conversations about redevelopment early. Phase 2 takes place just after the interchange is open. Cities should start by conducting a traffic analysis to understand how traffic patterns may have shifted after the opening of the interchange. This will be critical to understand the extent of change that will be necessary in the area. From there, the focus shifts to visible improvements and momentum building. This will include things such as enhancing trail access, adding basic amenities, and activating vacant spaces with events to draw people into the corridor. Phase 3 takes place about 3 to 7 years after the interchange is complete. With better data and a growing interest, the city can invest in larger infrastructure improvements, such as pedestrian crossings, bike facilities, and roadway redesigns to make the corridor feel more walkable and inviting. To reinforce identity, the city should support programs that encourage the adaptive reuse of historic buildings and introduce gateway features and add public art. Phase 4 takes place 7 years after the interchange is opened. By this point, West Beale Street has become an established destination. The city will shift its priority to maintaining the success that the West Beale Street already has, with ongoing management and branding to keep the corridor active and evolving over time. So throughout all of these phases, the city should leverage a mix of local, state, and federal funding sources that align with the vision of West Beale Street. These funding sources include redevelopment grants, infill incentives, and transportation grants, just to name a few. Overall, this phased implementation approach will allow Kingman to start small, build momentum, and scale strategically to ensure that West Beale Street becomes an intentional destination.
Okay, so for key takeaways, what's important about this project is that every component reinforced the others. Peer communities showed us what works, existing conditions showed us where the opportunities are, and the public confirmed the direction. Across all three, the same themes kept emerging. Communities that act early in identity and placemaking often fare better than those that wait. West Beale Street currently functions as a highway, not a destination, but the bones are there. And residents and visitors alike want a safer, walkable corridor rooted in Route 66 character and better connections to trails in downtown. Those shared themes are what ultimately drove our final recommendations. This framework is a practical guide for Kingman's next steps in redeveloping West Beale Street into a gateway that shows who they are and brings people back into the community. Thank you. Any questions?
Do we have any questions from the audience?
How many people do you think were residents that took your survey out of Tulsa?
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating that question one more time?
Just curious, how many people were residents out of the 1,200 that took your survey?
Yeah, I believe it was 91% of all respondents were residents of Kingman. So it's a very high level.
That's good.
What changed?
To what extent do you believe tourism driven by attraction to the development of and advertisement of local trail networks, to what extent do you believe that tourism will benefit Kingman? It will have a certain benefit, obviously, but its degree of impact is something I'm curious about.
You do want to feel that, I reckon.
That's not going to be the main focus of it, but it's more of a thing that people can do in the area if they're coming in or if they're on their way to another destination, like the Grand Canyon or another larger destination. They can stop in Kingman, and those amenities are going to be made more obvious with the additional amenities and the signs. And that also makes it easier, not just for tourists, but for locals who might be interested in outdoor recreation, but they're not aware of those things. So it makes it better for residents as well as tourists. But the main focus for tourists is the wayfinding and the additional development that makes it more of a destination that way.
Did you say you had a second question as well? Okay.
Any other questions in the room? I have a question for you all.
Oh.
If 1,200 responses.
That actually comes down to the city of Kingman doing a really good job of publishing that out on their socials.
We were very lucky that it was posted to Facebook, including TikTok, which garnered quite a lot of a response. So there must be something going on that they're doing right.
Ah, excellent. And then we do have a few questions from folks joining us online.
All right, Ricky Perry fan 124 is wondering, what was your favorite part about working on this project?
My favorite part was the public engagement. That was something that I didn't have a lot of experience with, and it was a lot of fun to hear what people had to say and take their feedback and try to work it into our recommendations.
Awesome. And then the second question is from Frankie Perry fan 123. What's one thing you would like to see the most?
That is a really interesting question. And I guess, does anyone want to jump in on this, or may I? I really think that the increasing of the signage and the wayfinding in the area is such a good starting point that actually developing from that, it's a really good stepping stone. And in terms of impact that it can have, it punches quite above its weight class.
Any other final questions? Alrighty, thank you all so much.
Thank you, sir.
While they are taking their picture, I'll go ahead and queue up our next project featuring the City of Phoenix with our online students, Clayton Gordon, Dejan Mill, and Natalie Morrow, who is here joining us in person.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We are Team Catalyze Eastlake Garfield. My name is Clayton Gordon, and today I am joined by my teammates, Natalie Morrow, who is there in person, and Dejan Mills, who is joining online. Today, we will be presenting our Catalyst Site Evaluation and Development Concept for the Eastlake Garfield Transit-Oriented Community. The focus for this project was where the walkable urban code should be implemented first to support walkability, affordable housing, neighborhood identity, and transit-oriented growth. Today's presentation will move through the project in 5 parts. We will begin with the policy background and why this work matters for Eastlake and Garfield, then move into the existing conditions that shaped our analysis. From there, Natalie will walk us through our methodology and public engagement findings, followed by Dejan, who will present the selected catalyst site and design concept. Finally, I will close the presentation with our implementation path and final recommendation. Together, these sections tell the full story of how we move from a broad planning goal to a site-specific development concept for the Eastlake and Garfield communities. So our study area for this project is the Eastlake Garfield Transit-Oriented Community, of course, located east of 7th Street, extending east to the I-10, and north of Jackson Street, extending north to the I-10. The goal was not only to find vacant land near the light rail, it was to also identify a site where rezoning, public ownership, community priorities, infrastructure, and design can work together to support a walkable and community-responsive redevelopment. So before we get to the site recommendation, we believe it's important to recognize the planning work that brought us here. This project builds on Reinvent Phoenix, which established the original transit-oriented vision around the light rail corridor. The Walkable Urban Code then gave that vision a zoning framework by encouraging compact, pedestrian-friendly developments with active frontages and stronger connections to transit. Now, through revisiting Reinvent Phoenix, the city is moving from big picture policy into implementation. That means identifying real catalyst sites, supporting mixed use and mixed income opportunities, and preparing locations where WU Code rezoning can make the greatest impact. This project is part of the next step in that story, which is taking planning goals and translating them into specific place-based strategies. We believe it's important to consider that Eastlake Garfield is not just a blank redevelopment canvas, right? For one, Eastlake Park is a historic center of African American culture and civil rights activity. Also, Garfield is one of Phoenix's older streetcar neighborhoods with a strong Hispanic and arts identity. Stakeholder input repeatedly emphasized that historic preservation and cultural continuity should not be treated as background details in this project. These community factors should be considered as planning constraints and as planning assets. It's important for walkable urban implementation to add housing and walkability without flattening the neighborhood character that makes this area distinct. Our existing conditions analysis showed a community that has strong assets but some real equity concerns. The report identified about 9,200 residents, with 31% in poverty, 73% Hispanic or Latino, and 18% of households are without a single car. That makes transit access, shaded walking routes, and nearby daily services extremely important. At the same time, the district is also supported by meaningful community-serving places, including Eastlake Park, Verde Park, schools, churches, light rail access, and nearby downtown destinations. The goal is to make sure future development strengthens those places that people already rely on while adding housing, safer walking, shade, and everyday services closer to home. Looking at land use, we see a neighborhood with residential blocks at its center and commercial areas along key corridors. Public ownership was particularly important to us because when the city already owns the land, it can be easier to guide development toward public goals. Vacant parcels were also important because they can allow new housing or services to be added with less displacement of existing residents or businesses. In Eastlake Garfield, our analysis identified 242 vacant parcels, which is about 4.5% of the TOC. And of course, just because a parcel is vacant, it does not always mean that it's a great catalyst site. However, it is certainly a good benefit to the rezoning process. The main takeaway here is that land use and ownership were key attributes to help narrow our search because we are really looking for places where the city can actually move from planning ideas into real world action. Eastlake Garfield has a strong public transportation foundation. The light rail and bus networks give residents access to downtown Phoenix, Tempe, and other major destinations without needing to rely only on a car. However, as we all know, access on a map does not always mean comfort on the ground. Some streets still feel difficult to walk, bike, or cross because of traffic speeds, limited shade, the heat, and or safety concerns. This is why we believe that mobility and heat need to be considered together during the planning process. A transit stop may be close by, but if the walk to get there is hot, uncomfortable, or unsafe, then the transportation system is not serving people as well as it could. For this project, we wanted to make sure that walkability is not just about distance, but also about streets that feel safe, shaded, and usable in everyday Phoenix conditions.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Natalie, and I'll be talking to you about how we actually chose our selected site today. So we used a 7-step prioritization matrix, which means we looked at each site and we graded it based on these factors: infrastructure, social impact, environment, economy, resilience, mobility, as well as middle housing potential. What this actually looks like means for mobility, we would measure the parcel's distance from each light rail station. We would look at the sidewalk conditions, see if there's any biking infrastructure, and also travel patterns. Does it actually feel comfortable to be at this site and walk around and use multiple modes? So those were our factors, but the selection process itself started from broad to narrow. We selected sites that were both vacant and city-owned, and we got 10 large clusters. From these clusters, we graded them through the matrix, and for each one, we graded on a score of 0 to 1. We then averaged out those scores to have a comprehensive rating. The highest rating score was 0.96 at 1414 to 1434 East Jefferson Street, which you can see right in the middle. So you can't just have quantitative analysis, you also need qualitative that considers the culture, the lived experience of the people who are there. We did this through 3 avenues. We presented our matrix at the Central City Village Planning Committee, in which they critiqued it and gave us recommendations. We held an online survey that was available in both English and Spanish. In addition, we held 5 stakeholder interviews. These were with planning professionals, current residents, housing researchers, and community group leaders. So What the public actually told us was there needs to be a lot more variety in the housing types that Eastlake Garfield has. Specifically for families, we found that there was a large concentration of rental units that were 1 to 2 bedrooms or single-family homes. However, this is a historic area, which means a lot of the single-family homes are very old, and that means there is expensive and a lot of families are aging out of the ability to upkeep them. So, in addition, the Village Planning Committee added 3 factors to our matrix, including the distance from the I-10 freeway, which borders our district on the north and the east. HUD will not fund housing projects that are within a certain proximity, so this was very important. In addition, we wanted to account for factors that led to displacement within the area. This is a majority, minority, and low-income community, so it's very important that we prioritize incoming residents as much as current residents. Lastly, they advise us to consider water and sewage infrastructure. Who would have thought? It can be extremely expensive to extend water and sewage lines and can be the difference between a project penciling in and penciling out.
Hello, my name is Dejan Mills, and I will be presenting our final site selection located at 1414 to 1434 East Jefferson Street. The site consists of 6 contiguous city-owned lots totaling just under an acre. Noting city ownership is important as this reduces hindrances to development and WU code implementation. As shown, the site is less than a quarter mile from the light rail, and it is this proximity to the light rail and popular pedestrian destinations such as Eastlake Park, which make this site prime for WU code implementation. Moving on to the SWOT analysis, this shows us why Site A is such a strong candidate for development, as well as some downsides to be aware of. As mentioned previously, proximity to transit and public amenities is a strength associated with this site. In addition to this, another factor which puts Site A above the other candidates is the increased distance from the freeway. This reduces exposure of greenhouse gas emissions on potential residents and site users. Some opportunities associated with the site include the opportunity to increase affordable housing in Eastlake Garfield overall. In addition to this, there is the opportunity to employ underutilized climate mitigation efforts such as green roofs and artificial shading. While there is the opportunity to increase shading, as it stands currently, shading is limited around the site, and this is a weakness as it detracts from walkability. A threat posed to the site is the demand of circulation. Increasing traffic near the light rail causes concerns for congestion as well as pedestrian safety. Next, we have the final site plan. Upon WU code conversion, the site will be put into the T5 Transect district, which could be characterized briefly as a low to high intensity mixed-use urban fabric. Our site fits into this nicely as a 5-story commercial development, mixed-use development, starting with commercial on the ground floor, including a fully built-out daycare. The 3 middle floors include 2 to 4 bedroom affordable housing units in response to the lack of housing diversity in Eastlake Garfield, which is something that was noted in our public engagement, specifically our stakeholder interviews. On the 5th and final floor, we have a gym as well as residential amenities providing respite to the residents. The site plan finishes off with 2 internal play yards as well as 2 dog runs on adjacent sides of the building and parking pushed to the sides and the rear. And here we have the final design concept. It starts with 2 urban frontage areas. This provides active urban frontage on the street side of the development, increasing the overall active frontage in Eastlake Garfield in accordance with the TOC policy plan. In addition to this, these 2 urban frontage areas provide protection to the internal play yards as well as insulate the building activity from the public. Next, we have artificial shading to aid in walkability as well as green roofs to provide climate adaptation benefits. And finally, we have parking to the sides and to the rear to create enhanced circulation with security gates covering the parking areas and the middle entry points.
So, in conclusion, our recommendation is that Site A, located from 1414 to 1434 East Jefferson Street, move forward as a walkable urban catalyst project. To make that possible, implementation would begin with rezoning the site from R5 to WU Code T56, which fits our proposed building height of 78 feet. From there, the project would move through the city's standard development review process, including context planning, design and technical review, final approvals, construction, and inspection. Funding would likely need to come from a mix of public and private tools, including the Affordable Rental Housing Loan Program, low-income housing tax credits, the government lease excise tax, and Phoenix IDA support. Overall, Site A offers a realistic path to bring together affordable family housing, transit access, neighborhood-serving childcare, shaded walkability, and a more equitable future for the Eastlake and Garfield communities. Thank you for attending this presentation, and we are now open to questions from the audience.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Thank you for the great presentation. I'm curious to hear, I think the first floor daycare, I realized it's very useful for first floor. And I was interested to hear if that was informed by your guys' qualitative analysis from some of the work presentation on the topic.
Yeah, so I can start with this, and if we can add on with Clay and Dijon as well. We actually had an interview with someone who stated that this was a huge priority. There was not a lot of places for kids to go in the downtown as well as the Eastlake Garfield area. And so by providing it literally on the bottom floor, it is the most convenient way for parents to live and walk in an urban center while still having their kids taken care of and feeling like they can be there. And Clay or Dijon, if you'd like to add to.
I apologize. The question was a little bit muffled for me from your response. I believe I got the answer, but could we repeat the question?
Can you hear me, Clay?
Yeah, I hear you great, Natalie.
Okay, so the question was the daycare informed by any of our public engagement?
Yes. Yeah, Natalie nailed it. That was definitely one of the recurring themes that came up in our interviews with our major stakeholders. And so that was the reason behind choosing the daycare as the bottom floor. And we also specifically did not want to just create a retail space because we also got a lot of feedback that when you just create a general retail space, what ends up actually happening is that retail space remains vacant because the owners of said retail store or company has to do a lot of work to actually move into that bottom floor area, and it requires costs that these business owners a lot of times want to avoid. And then what happens is that bottom floor, even though it's mixed use, residential and commercial, the bottom floor just remains vacant, which is just an eyesore for the community. That's why we were intentional with making sure that we designed the daycare to be a daycare with children's bathrooms, appropriate ceilings, appropriate space based on per child square footage, et cetera. So that way, when the building is complete, any sort of daycare company or owner can move right in and they can begin utilizing the structure.
What would be some comparable projects? Right? As you're presenting this, I was thinking, like, what else would I see either in the city, in the valley, or somewhere else in the country that you would use as a base sort of to explain and compare this project to?
Yeah, so the question is, if you guys didn't hear, what would be a comparable city or site plan that we could use as comparison?
Yeah, I could jump on that one first if you guys don't mind. So one city that we were definitely inspired by is Pasadena, California. Pasadena was back in the early 90s, late 80s. It was suffering really bad from just a feeling of no culture, no walkability, and Pasadena implemented similar projects where they incorporated things like paid street parking and these mixed use developments to encourage people to actually get out and walk around Pasadena, get out of their cars, walk across from one shop to another, increase the foot traffic. And what ended up happening is, we ended up getting live music on the roads and a lot of people walking around, or around the mid and late 90s. And Pasadena, even to this day, I'm not sure if anyone has been out there, it is a really fun place to walk around. There's a lot of culture there. And so that's kind of the inspiration that we got, or that we pulled from when we were thinking of this site.
Yeah, and just to add on, we got the inspiration for a daycare from the public engagement, but I've also seen this in real life in Vancouver. The Olympic Village had a lot of these apartment complexes where the three-court apartment complexes open to the street with a playground in the middle. And it just seemed like such a great way for parents to be able to like live their lives while there's, the ideas of the eyes on the street and there's people watching and around looking at like watching each other and seeing your kids and this feeling of safety that comes with it. So I appreciate the question. Thank you. Yeah, Dorian?
I actually just had a quick question of the decision to segment the courtyard in two. And then, because like counting, there's sort of like four separate areas. There's the two dog runs and then two sides of the courtyard. So I was just curious why they're split up.
Yeah, so to repeat that, he was wondering why the site plan was split up, so symmetrical on both ends. And I know, as Clay, you can speak more to this, but I think it was the idea of just buffering it from the apartment complex, so there's more space with existing residents. But Clay, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, sure. I could tack on a little bit to that one. So if you look at the site plan, you see it has those two frontage buildings on the front, because for walkable urban code, you need 70% of frontage along your site's parcel. The width of your site needs 70% to be covered in frontage buildings so that it looks walkable like a downtown area. And so, starting with that, we also want to make sure that shade was intentionally designed at this site. And so the way that we have the two towers set up, the eastern and western tower at 78 feet high, and the building facing south, you will notice that that interior courtyard area, the Paseo courtyard, which was a thing that a lot of our public engagement revealed to us, that people really like those forecourt slash Paseo courtyard style buildings. And so you'll notice that with those two towers, one on the east and one on the west, and then the frontage facing south, that the sun actually doesn't hit that interior area very intensely at all for most of the day and for most of the year, actually. So the idea was to make sure that interior courtyard area had plenty of shade and also plenty of privacy, right? So even though there's that 10-foot gap between the two frontage buildings, which is a gated access only for residents, for the most part, that interior courtyard area is kind of privatized, but you can see into it, which is a nice aspect for those walking around, just to be able to see there and see, oh, that's a beautiful playground and courtyard with kids playing. It's just a nice atmosphere. But then at the same time, kind of giving the children that are playing out there that could be part of the daycare a little bit of privacy by being tucked away in the center between the two towers on the east and west, and then the southern two frontage buildings. And then the dog parks just on the outside were just amenities for the residents who live there to take their dogs out. And so, the shade wasn't quite as important in those placements.
Yeah, we got a lot of comments that people want places for dogs too, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one thinks about that.
And big dogs. They're not just the little poodles. They want the cool dogs. They want to bring their huskies out. So yeah. Not huskies. Are there huskies in Phoenix? That's terrible. I hope not.
Excellent presentation, y'all. I'm curious, I was really enthused to see the vacancy rate examined, and I was curious how many parcels within this TOC have already implemented WUEP code and what that actually looks like.
Yeah, so he was wondering how many parcels exactly have WUEP code already. We have a map with that. I don't know if you can bring that up, but
yeah. Can we pull up that slide with the existing conditions? There are several in the Eastlake Garfield TOC. There's actually one that is about 1 block west of where our site is. So it's the place is definitely teeming with the ability to implement this Woo code. So yeah, right.
The dotted line, yeah.
Yeah, right down there where his mouse is at, there is another Woo code site, and our site is just slightly east of that. So everywhere where you see that, it's a little hard to tell on this slide, but you see the dark dashed lines, those dark dash maroonish colored lines, those are indicating other Woo code parcels, Woo code zoned parcels.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll now welcome up our second group, also working with the City of Phoenix. We have Corey Wittenweiler, Evelyn Amakuji, America Mendoza, Edward Fox, Valerie Perez, and Jehao Lee.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm incredibly excited to be presenting with you, implementing the Walkable Urban Code, catalytic site evaluation along the light rail for the Gateway Study area. I just want to take a quick moment to thank our professors, Matthew Gomez and Paige Wolfram, for the expertise and guidance along the semester, as well as our client, the City of Phoenix, specifically Chase Hale and Joel Carrasco, for being wonderful partners for us throughout the semester. Just really quick to introduce everyone. Hi, I'm Corey Wittenweiler.
I'm America Mendoza. I'm Lina Makuji. I'm Valerie Perez.
I'm Eddie Fox.
I'm Jehao Lee. So our project agenda have 5 sessions. The first session is project background, and next section is methodology and the matrix. Next is site and development design and recommendation. The final section is discussion. This is our first section, project background. This session has 3 parts. First part is introduction. The second part is planning framework, and the next is existing condition. Our project is based on the Reinvent Phoenix initiative, launched in 2015 as partnership between the City of Phoenix, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Arizona State University, and the Vitalis Healthy Foundation. This initiative was created to guide sustainable transit-oriented growth along the region's light rail corridor. Our study area is located within the Gateway Transit-oriented community. A key tool supporting this effort is the Walkable Urban Code, a form-based zoning approach that focuses on creating compact, mixed-use, pedestrian-friendly environments rather than separating land use like traditional zoning.
Thank you, Lee. To help inform our decisions throughout this process, the team used some guiding principles from the city. First being the original Reinvent Phoenix Gateway TOD policy plan. This really provided us with a long-range community-driven vision for the area. We also used the Phoenix General Plan updated in 2025 to ground ourselves in broader city goals. For more design-focused elements, we used the Central City Character Area Plan to make sure anything we proposed matched massing, building form, and typology. We also used the Walkable Urban Code to really provide specific guidelines and criteria for our design. And finally, we used the land use strategy guide for the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, just to make sure any development that happened near the airport was following all its regulations. The team then conducted the existing conditions report. Some key takeaways from that were the aforementioned plans and policies. There are a plethora that really incentivize and encourage the redevelopment of this area to be more pedestrian focused, include walkable elements, and then really orient towards transit around the area. There is also really strong access to the light rail throughout the corridor with 3 station areas in total, although most of the development is currently more auto-oriented at the moment. There is also a plethora of city-owned and privately owned vacant parcels in total. We looked at around 50, split roughly between half and half. And then finally, there were some gaps that we noticed as well. As far as connectivity, there is lack of continuous sidewalks, a lack of tree shade. And then as far as equity, while the area does comprise around 1% of the city's population and total housing units, there is a real lack in the median household income being roughly $30,000 below the average.
Okay, so on to the next section, we're gonna be going over methodology and matrix, which what is in that section is public engagement, matrix development, and matrix results. So for our public engagement process, we had 3 steps: public engagement stakeholder interview, one with Jordan Greenman, a development lawyer, and Darlene Martinez from Future Leading Consulting. We then had another one, they're both part of the Village Planning Committee. The second step was Village Planning Committee with Central City. They helped us with local needs and development challenges. And then the next step was the public survey, the Gateway Community. They helped us range on a wider range of experience and participation for people who actually live in the work in the area. This was the Village Planning Committee when we presented our project. This was our interview with Jordan Greenman. This was our interview with Darlene Martinez. And then these are the 2 surveys, one in Spanish. So for our public engagement feedback, we had 4 important things that we really stuck out to us. One was infrastructure and site conditions. One of the basics that we really wanted to look at was landscape, gaps in sidewalks, and utilities. Those are the main things that we really wanted to focus on. Another one was the WU code awareness. Not a lot of people know about the WU code, and that was something that we really wanted to make sure that people knew about. The neighborhood identity. A lot of people feel like the community is really based off the airport and that they don't really have a sense of identity. Another one was health and safety. A lot of people feel like it's not really safe due to the proximity to the airport, not to the airport, the freeway. And then because the study area is mainly industrial, they don't feel like health-wise it's not that safe. 2 quotes that really stood out to us was Gateway may feel lost, there's no real identity, and a lot of people don't know who to call, they don't know who to ask. Those are 2 quotes that really stood out to us. So for the public survey, community priority rankings, the things that really stood out to us, but also the community felt was safety, affordable units, walkability and transit access, infrastructure upgrades, and public spaces. The community is technically walkable because there are sidewalks, but it's not that walkable due to the industrial site being so large and it being very hard to walk. Another one was the desired development type, public spaces. There's only 1 park in the whole study area. So it makes a lot of sense for it to be number 1. Grocery stores, there are 0 grocery stores in the whole study area. Small businesses, restaurants, housing, and office spaces, there's a little bit in the area, but not that much. And then preferred housing type, affordable housing, apartments, townhomes, and mixed use. We did take that into our recommendations, and affordable housing making sense being at number 1 due to the median household income.
Now moving on to our evaluation matrix. The final score was comprised of suitability at 70% and equity need at 30%. Suitability captures what makes a site developable today, things like zoning, general plan designation, and distance to rail, while equity need captures where investment is most warranted. These indicators can include heat exposure, tree canopy, and cost burden. After applying our matrix to 54 candidate sites, these are the top 10, with site CAC emerging as the top ranked site at the southern portion of our study area. To compare 54 different sites fairly, we needed a way to put every indicator on the same scale. For most indicators, we used a method called min-max normalization, which places raw data like acres, dollars, and distances on a scale from 0.2 to 1, based on how each performs relative to one another. Site CAC ranked first overall with a suitability score of approximately 0.83, which tracks with the site's profile being city-owned, 8.5 acres, and already zoned conducively. On equity need, it scored about a 0.75, which flags gaps the surrounding community is living with today. Together, these scores point to where TOD investment could meaningfully improve existing conditions while also serving as a catalyst for broader development in the study area.
Yeah, so we'll continue to discuss the site context, like what makes it developable, why is the site suitable for being a catalytic site, and also how that informed our site planning specifically. Next slide. Yeah, so given that this is a TOC development, it's important that we look at what are the transit or transport infrastructure that exists around us. So within a 5 minute walk radius, you have the light rail station on Jefferson and Washington Street. There are many bus stops distributed around. So like there's connectivity within site and outside of the study area as well. And then there are also pedestrian walkway and the bike lane as well. Even though we mentioned that, there's like discontinuity in other parts of the site, this site is actually very well connected. So there's also the option for active transportation if someone is interested. Next. Given that we are, Phoenix area, the sun is a major thing. So we wanted to understand how does the sun move in all the seasons and how can that impact how we orient our site. So we did the sun path analysis and okay, yeah, so we are looking at our site is the frontage is towards the north, so the east-west movement, there's the shadow that's created all year long to the front. So we plan to put a lot of our public focus activities towards the front so that they can be shaded and there's some more comfort throughout the year. And also just, people will sit around and chat and actually use the development that we are proposing. Next slide. So in terms of the size constraint, the site is within the 50 to 54 noise decibel contours, but this actually below the FFA regulation of like 65. But then because of different noise sensitivity, it's important that we understand this and see how we can prepare our layout in such a way that some of these things are mitigated for. And then there's also the Pacific Union Old Rail Track easement. It's not been used for a really long time, but then there's not been like a formal abandonment. So it would be important for the cities to dialogue and negotiate for either purchase, lease, or formal abandonment. Yeah, so the city of Phoenix at large follows a concept of like live, work, and play. So it's important that we understand like how can our sites, how does our site fall within that framework specifically. So within a 5 minute radius and practically a 10 minute radius, there are many things there. So the only part in the site is actually located, it's also within the 5 minute walk radius. So people can actually use the park and people who are going to stay on that at that location. There's the one book code approved development similar to what we are proposing, which is very complementary and other recreational facilities as well as a high school close by.
This next section will be about our conceptual site plan, which serves as an example of how walkable urban code could be developed on this site. Our conceptual site design was informed by the Village Planning Committee meeting, public survey data, and stakeholder interviews. We then held a brainstorming session in which each of us drew our best idea for the site, and then we combined that to one consolidated plan. We then made a code study based on the assumption we'd rezone the property to walkable urban code T5 with the intended use of a medium intensity mixed-use development. Our uses include commercial and office spaces, mixed-use residential, a grocery store, a park space and open spaces, townhomes, and an art studio space. The park space and grocery stores were especially important due to the express major's need during the public engagement process. And the art studio space was especially important due to the neighboring arts and film focus high school. Starting with the two parcels, which total around 8 acres, we first mapped the site constraints, including setbacks and landscape buffers. The site was then developed around a walkable internal pathway system, which provides connectivity to the light rail station to the northwest, which is towards the bottom of the screen. And the building form, open space, and landscaping were all designed to provide shade for those pathways. And here's our use breakdown by square footage, including the unit numbers for the mixed use. Lastly, this last rendering was made in AutoCAD format, and it helped provide a realistic view of the site and help break down use by floor, having an active commercial use on the first floor with residential above.
Now moving on to our implementation strategy and future considerations. So to put this framework into action, we're recommending a phased implementation approach. In the short term, focusing on aligning the matrix with city goals. In the midterm, issuing a request for proposal on city-owned development or city-owned sites. And in the long term, implementation expands to broader infrastructure improvements across the whole study area, Of course, it's important to continuously engage with the community and update the matrix as scores and parcels change. And for our recommendations, we put that out in 4 different areas: on land use and zoning, aligning the general plan, WU code, and reinvent Phoenix goals; on mobility and connectivity, improving the sidewalk and lighting gaps; and environmental and site constraints, incorporating setbacks, thoughtful site design, and materials to help mitigate the noise exposure constraints that we flagged earlier in our analysis. And finally, implementation success depends on how we get developers familiar with the WU code and how we can utilize public-private partnerships to get projects off the ground.
Right. As the team gets ready to hand the project over to the city, we just wanted to close with some concluding thoughts. First being that the amount of city-owned vacant parcels in those station areas within the study area is really special. It can really help the city guide development to the vision that the community envisioned. Secondly, as our plan will add on to a decade plus of plans, policies as that are really encouraging this mixed-use walkable development. So it is really a catalyst to move forward. There are 3 station areas within here. All of them offer a unique opportunity. The one we chose near 24th Street being close into downtown. We also have 38th Street near Gateway Community College, near the Park and Swap, near the Phoenix Rising Stadium, as well as 44th Street being a true gateway to many visitors to the city for the first time from the airport. However, when you do develop in this area, there are some serious considerations, airport being one of them, making sure noise and other unintended uses are kept away. As well as industrial uses in the area. There's a large industrial base, so engaging property owners if you're going to rezone or change zoning within that area is important, as well as clean up for any previously industrial zones as well. And finally, to ensure that there is success with this project, there needs to be active community engagement, meaningfully engaged, and just make sure they are along for the process the entire time. And with that, thank you so much.
Thanks for the great presentation. I was wondering if you could speak to the housing that you're proposing being part of the plan, and whether affordability came up at all in your public engagement or your analysis of existing conditions. And I'm especially curious if you would recommend that any future requests for proposals for the site have an affordability component.
Absolutely. Part of the site plan and our calculations for parking was assuming that this would be a 20% affordable housing unit, particularly using a LIHTC or other funding source to get there as well as it being a city-owned parcel, potentially doing a donation or just reducing the cost of the land to help increase affordability. Is definitely something we considered throughout all the sites we looked at as well.
Got a question right here. Excellent presentation, very well done. It's certainly an area that is in need of some redevelopment and revisiting that. Reinvigorating is a wonderful thing. I noticed in the couple things in the site planning, which seemed like that was well done. Being that it's a walkable urban code, I was wondering if there's any opportunity to reduce parking standards. I think I saw it said parking structure, so I was kind of conflicted with the notion of a structure needing lots of parking, of course, and the notion of the walkway.
Yeah, so there's some parking standards required in walkable urban code and under the T5 zoning, which we did look at and calculate how much parking we would need with the 20% reduced parking. I think it was about 267 spaces, so that we provided, and also that was required. So we just went up to the required amount, and that was calculated based on sort of the square footage of that parking structure, which would be about 3 floors, and then the surface parking as well. So that added on. Yeah.
Great to see you put some thought into that. Appreciate that. But my final question is on the implementation side, and maybe I missed it or lost me somewhere. I thought it said in the first phase you needed a general plan amendment. Is this area not already teed up, so to speak, from the zoning and general plan standpoint to implement the WU code? And if not, let's triggering the general plan. Maybe I missed it.
You're good. It is currently zoned industrial, and as the general plan designation is industrial as well. So there would be a need for an amendment. It being city owned, though, we do think it's something we can accomplish in the short term goal.
No problem. Any other questions?
Hi, nice presentation. I'm just curious to know that, how your site is going to fulfill the needs of, all English people, like children or maybe youth and English people. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so the uses on the site are actually diversified. So there's the playground, which is open to the public. We have a space in our concept. We understand that people may want to experience different things. So there's a space for food truck that will have weekly or monthly activities, depending on what works for the people who stay there. And then we also have some workspaces and shops that are place activating activities. So I think there's a lot or sufficient for every age group to actually benefit from our proposals.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if, I don't know what the criteria was that you were given, was looking at the cost of construction and the ultimate cost of the project, was that part of the consideration that went into this project?
At this current stage, it was not, although it being city owned, we did take some assumptions that there would be a reduced cost in building. The site plan was really more conceptual of what, given all the right circumstances, what could be built under the T5 walkable urban code.
Excellent. Do we have any more questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. Go ahead. Thank you. Our next group also worked with the city of Phoenix, featuring Alex Musarakwe, Jawer Al-Sharani, Ethan Glademans, Tanishq Jain, Veronica Mandasari, and Ume Lebaraha.
Hello everyone. Today we will present our project on Alhambra Phoenix Urban Village Dashboard with our team. I'm Jawar Shahrani.
I'm Ethan Glademans.
Tanishq.
Umile Baraha. Veronica.
I'm Alex.
I'll start introducing the project scope. Our project focusing on developing a GIS-based dashboard for City of Phoenix using Alhambra as a case study. And we integrated key planning data, including permit, land use, and zoning, and demographic into one platform. We then analyze the spatial patterns and the changes over time, while also incorporating inputs from planning staff. The final result is an interactive dashboard designed to improve development tracking and support better planning decisions. Moving to the urban village model, Phoenix established this model in its 1985 general plan, dividing the city into 15 urban villages. These villages follow a polycentric structure with a mixed-use central core and neighborhood centers and surrounding residential area. Each village has a 20-member village planning committee that advises the planner on land use and zoning decisions, helping keep the planning process local, efficient, and focused, while preserving each village unique character. Our project scope is based on all Phoenix urban villages. We use Alhambra as a case study because of its central location and moderate size and mix of urban and suburban nature, which represent the goal of our dashboard. The study area of our project
is Alhambra Urban Village, located in central Phoenix. It has a population around 190,000 and it's divided by Interstate 17, which plays a major role in shaping development patterns. Most of the area was developed in 1940s and 1950s, so it includes many established residential neighborhoods, and the village is located around the Cresttown area, which served as a main center for commercial and economic activity.
So traditionally, City of Phoenix planners have utilized dashboards to effectively communicate and track planning actions across the village. These actions include things like permit approvals, zoning changes, and just general trends. These static reports were last updated in 2021. You have your annual report, which is primarily narrative-based and focused on larger projects that planners would like to champion, as well as the annual dashboard, which is instead map-based and uses a location-based points for all planning actions across the village. There's a significant amount of data overlap between these two, requiring a lot of annual cleaning across multiple systems. This, of course, was time-consuming, inefficient, and pretty ripe for human error, prompting the need for an overhauled and efficient system.
We then conducted a best practice analysis. With what we did was we looked at some existing dashboards and we identified what they were doing right and what we could implement from these current dashboards. And we took away 5 best practices are most relevant for City of Phoenix. First, keeping filters simple and task-oriented is critical. The strongest dashboards only use a few intuitive filters such as year, geography, and categories, and make sure these update everything on the page consistently. This kind of reduces confusion and in turn makes the dashboard easier to understand. Second, prioritizing clear key performance indicator summaries are essential. The dashboards that highlight key metrics such as housing units, total permits, or project count kind of use large and easy to read numbers. So it's easier for the users to understand quickly without digging into deeper details. Third, combining maps with data visualization adds important context. The strongest dashboards integrate maps with charts or tables, so it allows users to interpret both spatial patterns and numbers at the same time. Fourth, drill down transparency is a major strength, allowing users to click into individual projects or permits and seeing consistent details such as status, timeline, or descriptions kind of in turn builds trust and improves usability of the dashboard. And finally, structuring data for storytelling and comparison is key. Grouping indicators into clear categories and enabling time trends or neighborhood comparisons allows users to interpret data over time and across areas. And this is an example of the 2 dashboards we looked at and the kind of best practices we highlighted and took away from these 6 dashboards for the best practice analysis. Further, we conducted some stakeholder engagement where our main goal was to identify how can we improve our current dashboard in 3 main ways. First, to make it easier for the staff to produce. Second, improving its role as a permitting support tool. And third, making it more useful for the village planning committees. Again, since the dashboard you're working on is an internal tool, we focused on targeted interviews or staff interviews rather than a broader public engagement. And we selected our interviewees using the city's 2025 process improvements report, and we selected these 4 key roles. We then conducted semi-structured interviews focusing on understanding permitting workflows, data availability, reporting challenges, and potential dashboard use cases. And some, again, key takeaways stood out from my interviews are so. The first is that reporting is highly time intensive and inefficient, where users have to, or the staff has to manually pull and verify data from multiple sources. So a centralized system would definitely reduce the burn significantly. Second, there are major data gaps that limit analysis. Important metrics such as height count or building height or unit count and affordability are often not stored in structured data or structured manner, which makes it difficult to track and visualize. And finally, the dashboard needs a balance between internal and external use, which means the staff require detailed, well-explained details compared to a village plan committee require clear project level insights rather than just raw numbers. And again, the analysis or the takeaways from our best practices and the stakeholder engagement help us prioritize our dashboard design.
Thank you, Tanishq. So to develop the dashboard, we obtained data from 3 publicly accessed sources. The first one is American Community Survey. So from ACS, we obtained population data, and the next one is City of Phoenix Open Data Portal, from where we collected our shapefiles for the village boundary and all other information. And lastly, from Maricopa County Assessor's Office website, from there we collected all the zoning and land use data for each of the parcel in the Alhambra village. Next, we got all the permit data for Alhambra Village from the City of Phoenix, as you can see from the screen. So here we got all the information on parcel level, such as the issue date of the permit, the completion date, the value, and all other things. So for the dashboard methodology, there were 3 phases. The first one is data collection and cleaning. So from all the data that we have got from public resources and City of Phoenix, we created a few layers and maps in ArcGIS Pro, and in data integration part, all of those were integrated in ArcGIS Online. And from all those layers, we created one web map. And in the last stage, the dashboard design, we integrated that web map with 13 layers and created 8 widgets and charts. And those are interconnected so that you can see what are the information that you can find in each parcel.
So this is our dashboard mock-up. As Raha mentioned, it's operated through Experience Builder, and we have 8 different widgets here. These all widgets are connected to the interactive map on the center. On the map, we can zoom in and zoom out, and all the data on the widgets will be updated automatically. Also, on the layer panels, as Raha mentioned, we have 13 different layers that you can turn on and off. Also, we have the legend that are relevant to the data. As all the data is connected, if we click one of the data feature on the widget, the data on the interactive map will also be highlighted. And we can just clear selection and do it over again. And the last thing that I want to show you is the filter feature here. We want to focus on permit data, and by issue here, we can click the year that we want, click apply, and all the relevant parcel data will appear here. We have permit name, permit type, permit value, and APN, and we believe these are very important for us. If we click one of the field box and click show on map, it will go directly to the parcel data that we selected. And all the charts and graphs also be updated as well. We can do this for multiple. If we click 3 boxes and show on map, it will go to these 3 parcel data. As you can see, all the yellow highlighted on the left and on the right are selected. So all this will be shown as additional layers on the layer panel. We can turn on and off, but if we want to remove them, we have to click refresh, and you can do all the interaction and the filter all over again.
We go. All right. So upon completion of our dashboard, we were able to glean a couple of preliminary findings. Our first finding was that the northeastern portion of Alhambra is primarily single-family residential and a bit wealthier than the rest of the village. We looked at permit data for additional dwelling units added. We found that the bulk of these permits were just for one singular unit added. And despite around 500 of these permits being issued every year, roughly only 8% actually get completed annually. Finally, we found that Alhambra exemplifies the urban village plan by establishing a clear network of vibrant cores, centers, and corridors across the urban village.
Excellent. So I'll run us through our recommendations. With all these recommendations, we wanted to account for the utility to staff, what those time requirements might be, and then highlight any potential challenges. After going through those 3, we prioritized through a short, medium, and long model And critical to this, even if something is short, doesn't mean that we should start it right away. And that's the biggest, most important thing. And even if something is in the long range, it doesn't mean that it's unimportant and we can worry about that tomorrow. We need to be kind of working on all these in a holistic manner. We have split our recommendations into 3 groups: dashboard enhancements, permit data, and separation of the village plans. I'm going to highlight a couple of enhancements. Key to this is policy efficacy testing. This is one of the strongest things that we saw from our case studies previously examined. And this could be, we add a new ADU policy, and we want to see, how many ADUs are actually being built. Is this policy meeting its target goals? And a dashboard can help visualize that and really strengthen narratives that we provide to the public. Under permit data, this is the most important, but least seen facet of the work that we do. One of the key recommendations that we have is to improve the site characteristics that are stored as raw data. As mentioned before, if we want to understand what building height is and how those have changed, or have we added ADUs in locations, those require a really manual process in which a planner has to run through each individual permit and then map those, which is time consuming. This comes at a large cost. So each data column that is added has a large cost to the city, and then a small cost to each planner, right? So there is an item that you would have to input. But we think that it would be beneficial to spread that labor across, every single planner that is working on these site plans, rather than going through and manually reviewing them individually. And then from the annual report split, this is something that came from our stakeholder interviews. One of the key reasons that we've slowed down on our planning reporting is that it was difficult to include both, the heavy technical side of the dashboards integrated into kind of the broader picture village plans. We recommend splitting those out, and so we have, our heavy technical GIS side right in the dashboard, and then we can more quickly and effectively get out those village plans.
Upon completion of our dashboard, we believe that it can be a valuable tool for planners to guide decision-making. Being just a blueprint that we developed, we're hoping between our final product and our methodologies that we found, we'll be able to provide the City of Phoenix planners with a valuable blueprint to develop their own internal dashboard. With that, we wanted to thank Matt and Paige, as well as our clients, Em and Chris. Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you. This is really informative. I was wondering, does this dashboard could also include tracking like entitlements, design review time, that sort of thing? You get an idea of, say, how many designs are submitted that don't also get implemented? I think we're always surprised by how many of those, just like mentioning how many permits are pulled but never actually finished. That was very informative.
Yeah, there were a couple of our best practice cities that have implemented, how far along are you within the process. And that could definitely be something that it would be integrated. We had not done that kind of parcel level analysis. The only potential drawback to that is obviously that the planner needs to be really on top of it, because then it's, if this is a live product, how up to date is it? And so from a data management side, there's potential difficulties there, but I think it's certainly achievable. Would you like to add anything else?
I was just gonna add that, yeah, this is certainly possible. We just need to keep track of the things and have a good data management system, and it will be easily updated, maybe weekly, monthly, yeah, so.
A quick follow-up. I mean, if I'm submitting for a permit, it seems like I'm entering in information, from the public side. So it might be nice to have that more, so someone doesn't have to look at my input and type it in again. Like if there's some way to correlate the two.
Clients might have a better understanding of how to go about that. I definitely agree with you that it would be really nice if there's a direct interface, right? I see, oh, it's in, it's submitted. I do believe that there's kind of email correspondence that go on at the site planning level to some extent, but how formalized that is probably varies from parcel to parcel, and kind of size of project too may have a potential influence on that.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much. Congratulations, guys. Such a wonderful project. My question is related to the performance of the dashboard since you're using experience builder and you're putting so many layers in performance published on ArcGIS Online. So is there any difficulty or lag that you experience to pull all those data sets or it just runs smoothly?
Can you ask me the question? Ask the question again. Any difficulties in?
Yeah, since you've put together a lot of layers, are there any difficulty in pulling those layers and there are any lag times or the performance issues or the experience builder works just fine?
So in the experience builder, the interface we choose, we could actually add 8 to 9 widgets, including charts and all those bars. And there were no problem or challenge in integrating the data sets. You just have to, I think, find the most suitable format for the data set, because the data sets were in different formats, maybe in Excel, in shapefiles, in different formatting. So I think choosing the best format and then adding it to the Esri experience builder would be the most important thing. And in terms of lagging, I would say yes. If you are like connecting all the widgets to the map, there might be some lagging, but I think we can overlook it because you can download all these data sets, like very large amount of data. So I think, yeah, it's still, you will find it like very helpful, even if it lags, I would say. So.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think one of the most difficult things is, because we're working on the GIS analysis on ArcGIS Pro, and if you realize on the ArcGIS Online, there is like some limitation on the analysis. So if we have to redo our analysis, we have to do it on our ArcGIS Pro and then transfer it again to ArcGIS Online. So that's why we have to update it again on our dashboard. So I think that's one. Yeah.
You might not want to run it from your phone, but should be okay.
Excellent. One final question. I was wondering if you all could speak a little bit more to the amount and the intensity of the data cleaning that kind of went into and what that whole process was like for you all and what challenges you faced and overcome.
Yeah, the data cleaning side was, as with most data intensive projects, the vast majority of it, right? We get to see the pretty pictures at the very end. And you know, oh, that looks like all of the labor. But most of it was spent in Excel. One of the big challenges and limitations from this project, and it's kind of shown in the report for the client side, was that the APNs, which we use to link, that's the accessory parcel number that we use to link the spatial data in with the permit data. When large projects get built, so larger than 5 units added, it's not quite that precise. There's a new APN that's generated, but oftentimes those are not linked like that. Happens on the permit side, but hasn't yet been updated on the Maricopa County Assessor side. And so about 35% of our total data set would require a manual update again. That's obviously really time intensive and was kind of filled into the process that was going on in the previous versions of the dashboard. Cleaning wise, like we had a lot of fun. There was a lot of hearty debate on, okay, why is this not working and how do we come to fix it? So yeah, it was probably 2 months straight of every session being something's not working. Oh, okay, let's see what we bought. So is there anything else y'all would like to
just the APN, yeah, we weren't sure why we couldn't visualize all the information on the dashboard because the APNs were changed. And so there were like 2 platforms the shape PHX and the Kiva sources for the permit data. So it was changed and in different sources, and we couldn't visualize all of the data. So yeah, we spent quite some time figuring out how to visualize the existing data.
Yeah, I just want to add something. Out of almost 4,000 data, I think we can only utilize around 2,000 something, almost 23. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. The latter half of our program this evening will feature our applied projects and our thesis projects. The first of which being Hayden Brennan with his client Valley Metro.
They only give me the mic. Okay, so I need to. Okay. Thank you. All right, thank you guys. How are you guys doing? Good. Let's get a round of applause for our project so far. Yeah. All right. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. I need to be like a centipede to juggle all these things, but let's do it. So, yes, my name is Hayden Brennan, and I am doing an applied project for my client, Valley Metro. So thank you guys all for being here. And it is titled Absorbing Unreliability, Rider Trust and Information Use in Valley Metro Bus Schedules. All right. I'm gonna have to have a dramatic flashcard switch. Okay. Yeah, so I've been an intern at Valley Metro for the past 10 months or so, and I've learned something very profound as I've been there. It's that, sometimes the buses come on time. And so I wanted to see if that variation in on-time performance relates down to the individual experience. That's the broad inspiration I had for that. And on-time performance, or OTP, is a metric for reliability that is the percentage of time the bus adheres to the schedule. And so we use that a lot in scheduling as, that metric of reliability. And so that is important to the transit experience because predictable wait times are important to the rider as it can determine their likelihood of a mode change and their overall evaluation of the service. And yeah, so basically, if I wanted to know if we make improvements to the on-time performance, which they do vary a lot by route, how does that impact, or does it make the rider have a better experience directly on that route? So in order to do this, I wanted to go out on the buses directly of our routes with the highest and lowest on-time performance and ask a 3-question survey. So I wanted to on the highest route. So just for reference, some routes, the highest OTP route I went on had an on-time performance of 95%, and that's the amount of time that it's within 6 minutes late to 1 minute early. And that's like a route, the Stately Drive, 128, a smaller route, versus Camelback Road, who their bus route is 50, that has as low as 65% on-time performance. So that's the variability that we're talking about here. So out on these routes, I went out there in person and I asked a 3-question survey. So I asked, first, what method do you use to see what time the bus comes? 2, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you trust that the bus will come at that time? And 3, yes or no, are you making a connection? And that's inspired by the literature that suggests, as it makes sense, connecting riders have a higher sensitivity to delay in that variability. Importantly here, limitation, I wasn't asking demographic variables or any other personal characteristics of the rider, but instead I was, for each person I surveyed, I was measuring that exact moment, how delayed. Is this on? Oh yeah, I'm not even talking. How delayed the bus was at the exact moment I was talking to them. So I was trying to measure those things and some other characteristics of the trip, including the headway at this specific time, as well as, of course, the time of day, which is important. All right. So my initial results sort of puzzled me because I was trying to connect, oh, do people trust these schedules less on lower on-time performing routes? And I wasn't getting anyone initially that knew what time the bus was actually scheduled to be there, which just broke my mind. But it does make sense. So basically, I'm going to now distinguish for the rest of my project that based on my methodology, which include most people using real-time tracking apps on the phone, that because my second question is how much do you trust the bus will be there? It's very much a measure of their trust in that specific method and an insulation from the actual bus schedule itself. Okay, so I just want to make that distinction. Because instead people were using phones. Do you trust me? Yeah, so basically the main use was these real-time tracking apps. So that kind of changed my perception and my way forward through this project, because as people were telling me, sometimes technology works, and that's most of the time. Just kidding. Okay. Okay. Woo! I thought it almost didn't work. The funny thing is I had to depend on it working in order to do that joke. So okay. Right. So here's some of my initial results. So my this is the pie chart shows the people I sampled. That I ended up talking to 75 people across 13 different routes, and the vast majority of them were using, well, not vast majority, but a third were using the Valley Metro app specifically, and then Google Maps. And then the third sort of interesting category to talk about is these people I'm deeming show up. So these are people without any schedule methodology, no direct consultation method, and then the transit app. So basically, it's a mix between people using real-time tracking apps, 74%, and then only 4% were using a static schedule, which was the Valley Metro website. Right. Okay. So we have the trust scores by method, and here I pulled out some of the ones with the higher count, just because their score is a little more valid. But the transit app has the highest score. Any transit app fans out there?
Yeah.
Make some noise.
Go
Okay.
transit app.
Yeah, diehard fans over there. Then we have the people, and they have the highest score at over 8.5, and then Google Maps slightly lower, over 7.5, and then the Valley Metro app slightly lower average trust score, and then the website with the lowest of their score. Okay. Okay, and then I also just wanted to, hopefully I don't want to talk too fast like pharmaceutical commercial or something, but I want to talk about some other results contextually that I think are interesting. So this breaks down to the third-party apps and the Valley Metro app are pulling from the same feed. So I aggregated those scores to make sure they were somewhat similar, and they were, with the third-party apps just being slightly higher at just over 8 out of 10 on average, and then the Valley Metro app, yeah, just about 7.5. Another interesting fact, though, people who were making connections had an average of 8.35 versus people who weren't making connections had an average of 7.38. So it's a 1 point higher for people making connections for their trust, as well as people I measured during late trips, which were 18 instances of interviewers actively being, who were not interviewed, but I was talking to them. I tried to get some other information out of them, but the late people on late trips also had a higher trust score based on this methodology. But my point of this is that this all is dependent not on the schedules, it's on their app, their phone use, not on the route itself. I mean, we can further see this would be my initial inspiration with a thought in my head. I was hypothesizing like higher trust on these higher on-time performing routes. So here you see the routes that I went on in descending order, their on-time performance. You see, it's not related at all. It's completely separated, and it's due to their method. Okay. So then also, because I was observing things actually on the bus, I observed sort of two extremes of people, and these are two people I talked to, number 71 and number 73. First is a category of personnel just call, this is wait as long as it takes. So these are people that were a significant group of my sample that directly chose not to look at scheduling information. So not only were they not wanting to look on their phone. And I would ask follow-up questions if they had a phone, because I was curious, and a lot of them said yes. But instead just wanted to sit there and would wait as long as it took. They would say things like, if you sit here, it will come. Or one woman said, if it, yeah, I guess that is trust. If it waits longer than 45 minutes, I'll just start walking. So I was like, oh. But that's kind of their attitude. I think that's like people that do have a high tolerance. And this is contrasted with Mr. Please, I'll do anything so I have to wait. And this is another person this is people who are on Camelback Road, the lowest on time performing route. And this person specifically, they're very excited to pull out their phone and show me exactly how they track. They know the exact street the bus will be at on their phone, so they can walk out and hit it seamlessly, like with their stride, to minimize that waiting as possible. So it's like a huge spectrum of people's sensitivity and their subsequent behaviors associated with it. Okay, findings and implications. So I think that the inspiration for the title of this project, when I talk about absorbing unreliability, I saw these two groups and their behaviors as ways in which they're instead of reliability being something promised or something as the agency that we deliver to them operationally, and instead it's a shared duty between the individual and the agency. So it's not just the bus system that has to deliver on time performance. It's kind of up to the individual to make sure they have a stable and reliable experience depending on their method. Either in the case of the wait as long as it takes, they would say things like, I just wait ahead of time, or I show up knowing that it could be later, so I will absorb that schedule delay and leave my house earlier. Or in the case of the real-time tracking folks, that they will kind of have this labor associated that begins in their apartment or in their home or at their work in tracking it. So those are ways that they are kind of taking on the responsibility of reliable transit experience. And this sort of challenges the generalizability of on-time performance as a reliability metric, because if people are measuring reliability based on what their phone says, not necessarily what time the bus comes exactly. So while the phones, the routes could have perfect on-time performance, but if there was an issue with my phone in conveying what time it comes, then I would have a low reliability evaluation of the service, even though it was perfectly on time, because it has to be mediated through the phone. Okay, I'm just making sure. Okay, so then, so delays also with this widespread real-time tracking use, I was curious that the delays they're less felt. Like I saw the delay coming, so I didn't leave my apartment until it said I should walk. But also becomes any delay within that much more visible and sensitive. So I can see exactly when much more clearly if it's not adhering to what my phone was saying. And particular feature with the Valley Metro app is it says the scheduled time and the actual arrival time. So those delays now are being directly looked at by every rider that uses the RTI. Okay, so then the final thing that made me think is I was wondering if the dependence on the real-time tracking app, so no one's using static schedules, they're either doing nothing or everything basically. Does this dependence on the real-time tracking apps across routes, does that mean a baseline trust in Valley Metro or in bus service in general? Or is it just the era we are in where we have access to technology and a lot of people have cell phones in their pockets to do it, we might as well use it? I'm still unsure on this question. But there's three recommendations. One, I think this really provides opportunity for non-clock face headways. So currently the routes are designed, scheduled in a way that is very aesthetically pleasing. If you're reading a schedule like so, you go down and the bus arrival minutes are always the same every hour, as they are clock face, meaning they're divisible by 60. So it comes every 15, 20, 30 minutes every hour. And that makes sense in a system of people reading a schedule, reading a transit book and walking out that way. But now no one knows what time the bus is supposed to come in, and no one's reading these timetables. So therefore, a non-clock face headway could encourage a lot of operational efficiencies that are currently being withheld because, depending on the cycle time of the route, some buses, they have an excess layover waiting for their 30 minutes to go forward. So currently there's a lot there that I would like to talk about more, but we're still going to time. I just have two more okay. I got one of these motions. Okay. But finally, so that's frequency. All right, so increasing the frequency reduces the wait time for those people that wait very patiently. I mean, people would wait 45 minutes. To me, that was like really shocking to me, but that is part of our ridership, people willing to do that. And so increasing the frequency is extremely important. And then third, app usage. So the app is not just a supplementary tool for our riders. It's like a primary service layer and the first touch point that a lot of riders use, either third party or Valley Metro app, and that begins before they walk outside. So recognizing the app needs to be as good as possible, because that is how people are experiencing our system, not just on the bus, but electronically as well. Okay, thank you.
I really enjoy your presentation. I just want to have a question that, in your study, did you find any route that's having kind of a more need of, frequency, or any route which is having this kind of complaints, like, the route is having a much more complaints about self rules and everything, and you want to incorporate that, or this route has need to like more frequency or something like that?
Yeah, well, I tried to. Sometimes the people didn't know when I was talking to them if their route was very high, the on-time performance are low. I didn't let that out that I was sampling them directly because of that. Like, your route has been isolated as one of the worst. What do you think? I think that it was crucial because I would try to sometimes. I remember I was at a bus stop with a guy and I was like, "Oh, this never comes, right? Right? Or what do you think? I'm never around." And they would be like, "No, like I remember it was." Not many people I had the opportunity to have this conversation, but he was like, "This one's pretty good, but 45 is not." And so I saw a slight understanding of it, and that was a good route. That was the safer drive route. But I think in general, it requires a ton of situational awareness that if you were always on your phone, that when looking at the real-time app, you won't necessarily have that understanding. So I think, was your question about specific routes that should get more frequent service? I'm not sure. I think all routes that are over 15 minutes should be considered as having more frequent service, because people, I think, we shouldn't be asking them to know so much about the schedule, but rather have more spontaneous travel in general.
Aiden, loved your presentation. You're always so good. Is anyone here from Detroit? Because I'm gonna curse those buses. I'm so sorry, but I was there on the National Planning Conference, and where I was living, where my Airbnb was, it was the bus that I used to take would come after an hour. And this one day, I was waiting at the bus stop. The bus is there. I could see it on the D-Dot tracker. The bus is on the stop. It's supposed to come, but it didn't come for half an hour. And when it did come, I was asking the bus, "Is this bus early or late?" And I was literally surprised. And he said, "No, there was construction and I got blocked," but you cannot be blocked for half an hour. and even then, my question for you is that there was a huge gap between what was shown on the Google Maps and what was on the D-Dot tracker. So the schedule was there, but one thing was showing me that this bus has come, or it's about to come, or it has passed, but the other one was not. So did you see any synchronization in timetables from those two apps, or what? Well, other than that, I really liked your representation of characters and your clock face, non-clock face recommendation for bus schedules. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that the bus. Sorry, I forgot your question. The different feet. Yeah.
Because the problem was that those two apps were not talking with each other.
Yeah. So that I didn't directly look at both apps one by one and sort of have an operational understanding. They should be coming from the same feed. and they have different, I think the differences that I saw in trust scores between the apps is less about the time, but the other features within them. So, you know, like the gamifiedness of the transit app, or the more like cut and dryness of the Valley Metro app, or, you know, things are more, you know, clickable on Google Maps. I think that I don't know the experience in Detroit or what two people they were doing, but I think you bring up a great point that our reliability of our service, because it's measured through the apps instead of necessarily the exact bus arrival, but a potential weak point because we're depending on a third party and a third party interface to deliver our product, which I think is important. That's different from, you know, decades before. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hayden. And feel free to take your client photo. Our next applied project is Hezekiah Soroka and his client, the city of Chandler.
All right. I don't have the showmanship of Hayden, so bear with me. I'll be a little bit more boring. My name is Ezequiel Rocha, and I'll be talking about my applied project called Downtown Chandler Pedestrianization Strategy, an evaluation framework and implementation roadmap for pedestrian-oriented street activation for the city of Chandler. I've been working with the city of Chandler for about 2 years, and now I'm partnering with the downtown director to go over this study. I work with the city of Chandler and the transportation side, focused on transit. So I love the presentation that Hayden did related to Valley Metro, but now we're going to focus a little bit more on the pedestrianization of the downtown area in the city of Chandler. So let's start with the reason for this project. When I first thought about a project, I came out to the downtown director, Lauren, who is here today watching the presentation, and I asked, what are things that the city of Chandler would like to do in the downtown? And one of the things that she brought up is that she would love to have better and more improved pedestrianization within the streets of the downtown region of the city of Chandler. One of the reasons is because Chandler is growing. Chandler is almost fully developed. There is very little vacant land, but there is a growing population and more demand for public spaces. And we have one park for every square mile of the city, but the demand continues to grow for more and more public spaces. Downtown Chandler is getting their new park, A.J. Chandler Park, remodel right now. So it shows that there is that demand for more people demand more space. And as part of this shift that has been happening, not just in the nation, but also in the Valley and in Chandler, is that focus in designing streets no longer just for the traffic of vehicles, but also for the pedestrian for the pedestrian experience. So it's that shift on the paradigm of developing and creating and designing the streets, not just for cars, but for people, and not just for them to pass through, but for them to stay in the streets. So the question that was brought up to me by Downtown Chandler was, which streets are best suited for pedestrian-oriented activation? So the way that I approached that question was first trying to figure out which part of Chandler and of downtown Chandler we're going to look at, right? So as you can see in that map on the left, in light gray is the entire city of Chandler map. The blue region is the downtown project, downtown area plan area, and in the small orange that is blow up on the left side, on the right side for you, is the downtown core. So the historic downtown area of the city of Chandler, where the project is focused on. So not the entire downtown area plan, but just on the core downtown district. The way that I approached looking at the streets within this area was by looking not as street as a whole, but street as segments. So every time that there is a corner, that is a segment of a street. Every time that there is an intersection, so I'm looking at each segment of each street in downtown Chandler and developing a multi-criteria framework. How can I evaluate different segments among themselves to see which one is better suited for pedestrian activation and which one might not be as well suited for pedestrian activation? And then creating that score and comparing them consistently, having a very clear criteria to be able to identify which ones are stronger and which ones are not. And then create that composite pedestrian activation score to identify which areas should the city, or which segments should the city prioritize. So looking at the literature and trying to figure out what drives pedestrian activity, 6 main topics were identified among all of the literature that was reviewed. One of them is connectivity and access, right? First, that street needs to be very well connected to the rest of the network of the city to make it attractive for people to use, but also, so if there is any type of activation that might close that segment, there are alternatives for the vehicular travel to continue moving. Diverse and intense land use. The better the land use, the more diverse it is, the more it brings people into the land use. It's not just a vacant land, for example, the better it is. Safety and comfort. How safe is this place? Is this street for pedestrians to be using? If you're looking at streets that are highways, they're the least safe for pedestrians. And then if you're looking at local streets, your residential streets, they're a lot more safe for pedestrians to use. Shade and thermal control. We live in Arizona, it's hot, we all know. So the better the street segment is suited to create shade, the better it is for thermal comfort for the pedestrians using that segment. Placemaking and activity. Does this street already have some type of activity that brings that placemaking, that thing that you identify this as a place, not just a way to get through somewhere else? Right? So it's looking at how this place feels like a place, not just like a passage. And operational feasibility, very important. The city will not just close places and then figure out that, oops, we couldn't close this because fire department is within this segment. And if there is an emergency, they need to get out fast, right? So it's like looking at how feasible it is for the operations of whatever's going on in there and in a city as a whole. So based on these topics that were looked at from the literature of what makes a good pedestrian environment and what brings pedestrian activity, I developed very similar six variables to identify how to categorize each street segment. Again, network connectivity. I'm looking at how much duplication of efforts are in this street. How many streets are very close to this? So if I close it, vehicles can move around. Future land use plan, the downtown land use plan, area plan, has land use, and then I'm looking at those that has high activities like high density residential and commercial activities compared to, for example, a resort that has some activity but not a lot, or neighborhood residential. So single family homes don't bring a lot of activity to the streets. We already talked a little bit about pedestrian comfort, but I'm looking at low speeds, smaller streets with pedestrian access already. So it already has sidewalks, ADA curbs, thinking about accessibility, not just for the average person, but also looking at all abilities. Shade potential. Are there big trees? Are there big buildings that they can provide shade on hot summer days? Placemaking. Are there, for example, outdoor dining already in that street? we love to walk through streets that have outdoor dining or have some type of activity. We don't like to walk on streets there is just a blank wall, right? So looking at that and operational feasibility, if there is anything that it's really hard to close that street, for example, a private driveway. So I can't close the street and tell the resident, hey, you can't get in or out of your home because we're closing for this weekend, for this month, or forever, right? So it's looking at this operational feasibility. So what were the key findings after evaluating every single segment, street segment in the downtown area that was identified for the study? Not all streets are equal, right? It's kind of an assumption, but it's always good to test and make sure that for sure not all streets are equal. This pedestrian activity potential is not evenly distributed. There are clusters. All right, so you can see right there in the middle of the downtown, that area in red is the historic downtown, and then we have the downtown district as the area of the study. We can see that they are very much clustered around the historic downtown area of the city of Chandler, with a couple of exceptions here and there. Strong segments already have better connectivity, active land uses, and a strong placemaking. So they already have what is necessary to then take the extra step to make a pedestrian active street. So the downtown Chandler already have that foundation for pedestrian activation. What was the second key finding that I found was that it's a network, all right? So high-performing streets are already connected somehow. As we can see, going from this, which showed the scores, how they scored, with the darker being the highest score streets, we can see that when we put them together, we can see that there is a network of those high scoring streets, that they are all connected. So it's looking them as network and how they connect to other places. We see in red all of those dining and shopping destinations that you can then connect to maybe those parking garages that are in black in there. So making that connection with the people that are already traveling downtown for some activities, and then connect them to that activity without them having to park right in front of the activity, but they can use the parking garages that are free parking that the city already provides. Some real world constraints that we have to look at is that even though those streets sorry, how did I get here? I don't know. Matt, save me. But what I wanted to say is that even though those streets score very high, as we will see when Matt gets that back, they might have real world constraints beyond the scores that were analyzed, right? So there might be for example, in here, I'm mapping there the fire department connection. So how much can we actually close that street for some type of pedestrian activation and make sure that they still provide the access to fire, to emergency services, to deliveries if we're doing long-term closures, and still providing access to businesses that might be a little bit more car dependent. Recommendations to the city is to build a connected activation network. Don't look at this as one street at a time, but look at this as a network of streets that you can activate for pedestrian use. Use tactical urbanism. Start small, starts cheap. It's okay to start cheap, test out, learn about what works and what doesn't, what segments work, what segments don't, and then refine the approach. And then lastly, prioritize shade. Any type of activation that will be done, if possible, add as much shade as possible in a cheap way at first, of course. And in conclusion, as we can see in that photo, downtown Chandler has the ability to provide these pedestrian activations as events in the past and events currently, with the closure for the construction of the AJ Chandler Park, have shown there is the opportunity to do farmers markets and some other activities. As you can see, this event is when Arizona Avenue was fully completed, the reconstruction of Arizona Avenue. So there is the demand, there is the physical structure. Some of the segments are already ready for that. It just needs to take that approach of low cost, and quick build implementation to then move on for more costly capital improvement projects to the ones that are successful based on that tactical urbanism. Any questions?
You're talking about the 6 things you're using for your variables. I was wondering, more long-term, like for example, let's say fire station access, and like the need for guidelines going forward, because if the city, is not clear about that, then you could introduce new conflicts in the future where you have this network of pedestrian streets, but then, you know, a business wants to add a driveway here, we want to do this. So like, maybe is that a useful thing in the recommendations to kind of guide the future growth? But, and then the second one is really quick. I was just wondering, it looks like there's a main street that kind of bisects downtown, and I was wondering if any of the recommendations would send that, or you just completely hands off treat as, you know, kind of work around it.
I'll start with the second one. And I didn't decide to go offhand with that one. The score shows that the feasibility of closing that one is really low. As you can see in that one in there, you'll see that Arizona Avenue is the avenue that you're talking about, has a very low score because of factors as it is a regional connector, right? It is a high speed compared to other streets. It has a large right of way, so there is less shade potential. So it wasn't my decision, it was the data showed that maybe it's not as feasible for this street to be considered, even though that last photo is Arizona Avenue being closed. But again, this goes back to, there are some real world constraints that need to be considered, and maybe there are some things like closing Arizona Avenue that even though the score is low, with that refining and learning about what works and what doesn't, can be considered in the future. This is not you should only focus on those streets, but you should consider those as your priority. And for your first question, on my recommendations on my full paper to the client, to report to the client, it does talk about some of the things that needs to be done. One of them is better communication and creating design standards. Any type of closure that will be done, we need to, there will be a need. The second phase of this project would be to develop design standards and also outreach to businesses and residents. Because I used a lot of the data from the Walk Wall Street project that ASU also did with the city of Chandler, to gather some of the resident data about pedestrianization in general, but not specifically for this type of pedestrianization that I'm talking. It was just focused on Wall Street. So further engagement needs to be done to exactly analyze how those business future plans, if they want to do something else that will then impact the decisions for the city.
Excellent, nice job, because your matrix was really thoughtful and all the things you're considering. I'm wondering if you can expand on what shape potential actually looks like, because you know, if we're talking about potentially closing down Arizona Avenue, I know that's the most extreme case. Like, it seems to me like there's a lot of potential there, right? Like, we decide to get rid of the concrete, like there's a lot of potential. So if you can expand on how that score came about and what sort of factors you considered, if it's just what trees are here now, what buildings are here now, or did it go to the same development maximums?
Thank you, Alex. And this was focused on current conditions. So all of those variables, we're looking at the snapshot of what is up on each of those segments right now. So another one of the limitations that I also brought up as part of my report to the city is that any future more permanent capital improvement project that will be done need to consider more of future impacts of doing any type of shade potential. So I'm just looking at very limited shade potential right now. I wish I had, for example, tree canopy data to be able to actually analyze all the shade that is existing. I'm looking at shade for as a variable of building and street right of way. So I looked at how wide a street right of way is and how tall the buildings are that can create shade, that can cast shade, and the orientation of the city, the street, because east and west street will have very little shade potential compared to a north-south street. So unfortunately, for this level of study, I wasn't able to go as far as you commented.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our last two remaining projects will be featuring our thesis. Theses that were completed this year. Up first is Julia Sadeh.
All right, thank you all for coming. My name is Julia Sadeh. I'm an AICD candidate, and my thesis will be about where best laid plans get laid, assessing the green infrastructure plan implementation gap in US cities. I would like to extend gratitude to my committee, Sarah Miro, who was the chair, and Dr. Megan Ellens, who is on sabbatical and couldn't make it, and Dr. Samantha Samples, who is also in here. Oh. Okay, so basically I'll go through an overview of what green infrastructure is, my methodology, takeaways, and also findings and takeaways. All right, so I won't go into details of what green infrastructure is. You can see the definition, but essentially green infrastructure is using natural systems or nature as an infrastructure system. So we mentioned shade just recently. If instead of a city constructing a concrete shed to provide shade, a green infrastructure solution would be to plant a tree. So that is basically what green infrastructure is, using nature to replace all these synthetic systems. So these are kind of benefits that we can receive from green infrastructure. So there is active transportation enhancement, mental health improvement, heat and stormwater mitigation, which is an increasingly major focus when it comes to green infrastructure use, increased property values, which is another benefit, but also has some disadvantages to it. So why this work? I think one thing that I got from looking at literature and also being on Dr. Miro's project was that I saw a lot of green infrastructure plans, people assessing green infrastructure for whether, assessing plans for whether they had green infrastructure or assessing how equity is addressed in green infrastructure or other things when it comes to green infrastructure. But one thing that I really didn't see was people or researchers tracking how green infrastructure has been implemented and whether these plans actually end up being implemented. So thinking about that, I thought through two questions, mainly to assess to what extent green infrastructure projects in city plans are implemented and what factors predict the implementation of green infrastructure projects in city plans. So I went through a very elaborate methodological process. Since I didn't really have a lot of research to base my current research on, I had to retrace most of these processes by myself. So we first had to select case city. Since I wanted to assess green infrastructure projects in city plans, I first needed to know which cities to select. So I selected 12 cities out of a green infrastructure survey that we had sent out to 240 cities. So I selected 12 out of them through a random sample. And after that, we selected it by case cities, the population size and also the climatic region. So we had 10 climatic regions in all, and 3 categories of population sizes, so small, mid-size, and large cities. And then we selected the city plans. So there are a lot of cities that have a lot of plans, but we had to select the kind of plans that can be prioritized or that can have these projects within them. And out of that, we selected 50 city plans in all. And then I had to analyze the data. But before that, one thing that I had to determine was what can actually be called a green infrastructure project. And as you can see on the left side of the screen, per my definition and within the context of this research, these projects have to have two main criteria. First of all was the green infrastructure project had to be type specific. So the city plan had to mention specifically whether it's a biosphere or it's a park or it's a rain garden. And then the projects have to be location specific. So they have to mention the location wherein they want to implement that green infrastructure project. So that was an inclusionary criteria to include projects within this tracking process. And then I tracked these projects three main ways. First, by looking at city budgets and also their capital improvement plans. And then I looked at Google Maps and Google Earth because if the city says they want to construct a biosoil on, let me say, 31st Avenue, it should be visible on the ground. So I looked at Google Maps, a time-lapse imagery of that specific site before and after the map and the plan was adopted to see whether those projects were actually implemented or constructed, to see whether the site has been disturbed. And then to contextualize these findings, I did interviews with city officials from all these 12 cities, but one, Butte-Silver-Bow, I tried as much as I could, but I didn't get to them. But I also selected two exemplary cities, Tucson and Denver, which we had an understanding of their green infrastructure program, and we knew that they were very good at that. So we decided to include them within this study. Although their plans, I didn't review them, but to give an understanding of how good of a practice green infrastructure is in other cities, we used these cities. We added these cities as part of our interviews, and then I compared the plans across all city plans to see which plan actually yields much more implementation. So there's a map to show you where the key cities are. So all across the US, and we had 7 climatic regions out of the 10 being represented in this sample, and we had every city within these climatic regions, 12 key cities, 4 small, 4 mid-size, and 4 large. And these are the type of plans that I reviewed for this research. So comprehensive plan, hazard mitigation plan, and a few other plans also. But there were 4 main plans that I got. Most of the cities had them: comprehensive plans, stormwater management, hazard mitigation, and parks. But climate action and also other plans were plans that weren't so common in other cities, but some cities had them. So we decided to include that. And there's a summary of what I did for the research. So I had 12 cities, 24 green infrastructure types in all, 50 city plans to review, over 11,000 pages of plans. That is a lot. And the oldest plan that I reviewed for this research was Newton's comprehensive plan from 2007. And the newest one was just 2 years ago from Seattle's Parks and Recreations Plan. And in total, I got 188 green infrastructure projects, and exactly half of them were trackable. So as I mentioned earlier, trackable projects were projects that were type specific and location specific. And they were exactly half. I vouch that I didn't make this up. So it's actually what I got. Moving into my findings, interestingly, almost 50% of all the projects that I found within the trackable projects that I found within the city plans, that is 94 trackable projects in all, but almost 50% of them came from Seattle, which was quite interesting. But later, when I had interviews with them and I also looked further into their green infrastructure program, I realized that they had a lot of things going on well for them. They had a very supportive city council. They had a very strong green infrastructure program and also people supporting those projects. And there were 2 cities that had all their projects being trackable. That was Butte-Silver-Bow and Peoria. That is why I actually wanted to interview Butte-Silver-Bow, but I couldn't get an opportunity. And Albany was the only city that did not have a trackable projects within their city plan. So now moving into the crux of my research, I wanted to assess green infrastructure projects implementation within city plans. And I couldn't just do it implemented or not implemented because there's so much nuances within it. So I had to categorize them under 4 main categories: neither budgeted nor constructed. These were projects that were not in the capital improvement plan, and budgeted but not constructed. These are projects that were either in the planning or design phase, but are not yet began construction. And partially constructed projects were projects that some construction had begun, but had not yet been fully constructed. So fully constructed projects were projects that had reached substantial completion or higher. And I did an interview with a city official from the city of Phoenix who helped me fine-tune these categories. Very, very helpful. So now I compared these implementation statuses by city size and plan type. And what I got was almost 30% of all green infrastructure projects in large cities were fully constructed. And all those small, but this was actually larger than or higher than the other city size categories. And it makes sense because most of these cities, like large cities, have a lot more resources to get projects through the door. And only 9% of their projects have not been budgeted. So that makes sense. They have a lot more resources to do that. But for mid-sized cities, almost 3/4 of their projects had not been budgeted. But every project that they had budgeted had started construction, which was something interesting to see. For small cities, did better than mid-sized cities for whatever reason. Almost 15% of their projects had been fully constructed, but they had a lot more projects that had not yet begun construction, which is also indicative of their sizes, because for large cities, they had a lot more projects reaching that budgeted and constructed phase, but for small cities and mid-sized cities, they had a different thing going on. And I also assessed the implementation of green infrastructure by plan type. And what I found was that 35 of the 94 trackable projects came from the Parks and Recreations plan, but the comprehensive plan had the highest implementation level. That is, most of the projects within comprehensive plans had been fully constructed. And I did a statistical analysis to test whether these relationships were statistically significant. I didn't mention that in the previous one. Green infrastructure projects differ significantly by city size. So that was for the previous one. But for this one also, I found the same thing. Green infrastructure implementation differs significantly by plan type. So dependent on the plan type, a green infrastructure project can be implemented. And the main finding I got from this was that a green infrastructure project is more likely to be implemented when included in a comprehensive plan. So comprehensive plans had higher levels of implementation than all the other plans that I assessed within this research. So I have 10 main key takeaways that I got from this research. And these key takeaways, I collated them by interviews and also research, reviewing literature, and also going through this analysis. And one thing I got was that plans are mostly aspirational. Most of these cities create these plans to give the conditions wherein these projects can exist, but they aren't really work plans or capital improvement plans. That is what it's mainly used for. But for these plans, most of them are basically aspirational. And also there's a funding gap, which is very obvious, as we can see. And also one thing that I also got was a lot of these cities, most of the cities that didn't really have a green infrastructure champion or someone to lead them, most of them had very few projects. Although there were outliers, but most of them had very few projects, which was indicative of their green infrastructure plan, and they're also competing priorities. And another thing that I also got was that a lot of these cities use green infrastructure ambiguously, and not just these cities, but even within research, we know of nature-based solutions, we know of low-impact development. In China, they call it sponge cities. So there are so many ways people use the term green infrastructure, and that also creates some problems. But for the positive side, one thing I also got was that most cities are moving away from just using the plans to predict implementation. They are pushing a lot more of that to the regulations, pushing a lot more of that to people or homeowners to abiding by regulations, implement most of these green infrastructure projects. And in addition to that, they also give them incentives to be able to make sure that they get these projects through the door. And some of these cities, especially Tucson and Denver, have green infrastructure manuals that they give to people who want to implement green infrastructure to look at them and see how they can get them done instead of looking on Twitter or Reddit or some other social media platform. And also, cities are also moving towards using a lot more green infrastructure initiatives. So for Denver, they have a Depaving a Greener Denver, where they are focusing on short-term implementation strategies to increase green infrastructure within the city. And finally, one thing that I also got from this research was that political support is extremely important when it comes to initiatives like this. And that is what really predicted a lot of the implementation within and the projects within Seattle's plans. Like they had a lot more higher political support going on for them. And I didn't talk about the graph within the middle. I asked the cities whether they had a system to track green infrastructure implementation, and 4 of them said yes, 4 said no, and 3 did not mention. In general, what I got from this research was that like a lot of these cities, a lot of cities within the US are actually pushing towards implementing these solutions, but there are a lot of hiccups, there are a lot of challenges that they need to overcome. And I think overcoming these challenges will definitely help them to push these projects, a lot more of these projects to the door. Thank you so much.
Excellent, thank you. Do we have any questions? I was curious, in your findings, what do you feel like is the perfect equation or a series of conditions that would allow for greater implementation based off of kind of the different cities you evaluate?
I think political support is crucial. Most of these initiatives are looked on as being extremely progressive because you are changing the normal way of building cities into using these more green solutions. So having stronger political support, people that in city council or even within the residents within the city, having them support you in this initiative is very, very important. And one thing I got even from Denver, is it Denver? Yeah, Denver, is that at the time they actually put forth a bill to tax themselves to increase these initiatives. And if you don't have people supporting these projects, like it won't just happen. So
that were, did you see those typically coming out of, sorry, for the projects that were implemented, did you see those typically getting implemented through like the drainage departments in communities, Parks and Rec, or did it kind of vary between community or?
yeah, that's something I didn't really specifically assess. But one thing that I got was that when I did the interviews, a lot of the contacts that I got for the cities were actually from the stormwater, utility, and public works side. Although I had some people from parks, but barely did I have anyone from planning. So I didn't really assess it, but I can make guesses. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julius. If you have your committee members here, you're more than welcome to join them over here for a photo. Our next thesis being presented is from Maheen Rahman.
Hello, everyone. So this is Maheen Rahman. Thank you to all my cohort members for presenting their works throughout this evening. So I'm the last one to present. So my thesis title is Spatial Planning of Urban Vegetation for Climate Resilience, a sensitivity analysis of prioritization indicators in Phoenix, Arizona. So I would like to thank my thesis committee co-chair, Dr. Sarah Miro, and Dr. Aaron Flores, and Dr. Dao Chintong, my committee member. So this study basically examines the sensitivity between the indicators. Why should the vegetation investments should go? So why the indicator choice methods? Like, so urban vegetation is is considered as one of the most efficient way to for the climate resiliency. But the problem is that why should why should they go first? So urban vegetation provides like heat reduction, also improve the outdoor comfort, improve the runoff. But cities do have many possible indicators for those decisions. But what should they choose and how they should choose? So I went to the literature. There is 4 core themes of this literature that heat metrics are interchangeable, like land surface temperature or the air temperature and the and like other median radiant temperatures are show different things. They are not the same. And also exposure is unequal, like socially vulnerable neighborhoods face the most like heat exposure and also less tree canopy. And as you know, there are co-benefits of the vegetation, and the current literature is not showing that there is no like any way where the single standard treating for green infrastructure to address heat and the stormwater across cities. So the research gap of the I got is that few studies explicitly test how changing the indicators changes the spatial outcome of prioritization. So I chose Phoenix for this for the case study of my research. As you know, the Phoenix is one of the like mega city, where the desert mega city where 1.6 million people lives. It has extreme summer, and also there is uneven social vulnerability across Phoenix. So like Phoenix has the planning momentum right away for the shade and also the for the heat. My research is not about like not about that Phoenix lacks on planning. Rather, it still needs a defensible way to decide on the like their vegetation investments. So that's the indicator. I have selected 17 indicators across 4 categories: heat hazard, flood hazard, and social vulnerability and vegetation. In heat categories, I have included of different kinds of heat metrics such land surface temperature, different kinds of air temperature, and also median radiant temperatures. These data sets are collected from different spatial resolution and different sources. Also, their observation time is different. So for my research, I have first of all I compiled a huge environmental data set for this project or research. Then I have to standardize those data sets so they can be comparable to each other. Then I have did the Spearman correlation to see their relationship between those indicators, and also I have counted the positive Z-score anomaly count to highlight where the tracks are multiple register unusually high values. Then I did the coefficient of variation statistical analysis too. So this is, as you can see in the map, the spatial pattern of the all 17 indicators. So as you can see for the heat rated indicators, the air temperatures are showing that the central south Phoenix are more are more in the heat risks. But as you can see, the land surface temperature or the median radiant temperature are showing the north desert parts are like are more hot because of the barren land of the desert areas. For the flood areas, they are mostly in the corridor based. They are not all over the Phoenix, mostly where they have this corridors of flood corridors. For the social vulnerable areas, the South Phoenix and the Central Phoenix are more vulnerable, socially vulnerable, and it also goes with the existing vegetation. They are like most like with each other. So I also examined the redundancy between those indicators. What I got that human exposure temperature and surface temperature are not same. They are totally different with each other. They are not correlated, like they are not correlated. And also the flood ones have like different spatial logics. They don't go with the heat indicators of the vulnerable ones. But the social vulnerability and the existing vegetation are very much correlated with each other. So it means that while the vulnerable neighborhoods are not getting the not getting that much of tree canopy. So I also did the a convergence mapping through G-score anomaly count. So what I got that South Mountain, Estrella, Central City, Lavin areas are the have the most priority in terms of converging all the indicators. So in those areas, they have less vegetation, they have the high exposure to the heat, and also some flood risks too. for the coefficient variation, like so I got why the low CV is like stronger agreement. So it means that those areas are stays high priority for those indicators where they have the stronger agreement, but the high CV area they have the more sensitivity. That means those in those areas like north part, if one indicator is high, then other indicator can be low too. It's basically low. So what the results mean for the planning, how this research can help the planning. So the first output from this research is that indicator selection is a critical decision. You have to be very much careful that obviously the planners and the policymakers, what they do want to achieve through their vegetation. So, so in some cities they do choose the LST as their heat reduction mapping, but it really doesn't help because as we see in the result part that land surface temperature and the human exposure temperature are not the same. And compound vulnerability clusters in the urban core. So in the other maps, in the other analysis, we have shown that the urban core means the south part of Phoenix, the central Phoenix has that compound vulnerability. And flood planning needs a different spatial logic that doesn't go along with the heat or the social vulnerability. So my study also has some key limitations. So the missing hazard like drought and air quality are not considered in this research. As you know, these are more on the regional term. And I put the equal weights to all the indicators. But I think if you put any weighting schemes that could improve the like whole mapping of the convergence or like multifunctional vulnerability. So, and another gap is that actionability gap. So in this research, I just talk about the why should they prioritize, but I didn't talk about any strategy. Like, and also our cities like Phoenix especially lacks on the available land to those vegetation, like city-owned land. So I also propose some future research directions. Like other southwest cities can use this framework for their like spatial prioritization of vegetation, and also you can also develop a decision support tool that links maps need to city workflows. And if we put the weighting schemes, then we can compare those decisions too. So if I want to conclude my whole research, there are three key takeaways. Indicator selection materially changes the priorities. It is not a like technical, it's not a like neutral technical step. It changes which neighborhoods are seen in highest need. So planners do need to be very much careful in this thing. And air temperature and social vulnerability indicators align more more strongly. So if you use for the land surface temperature, you want to see that I want to reduce temperature in the vulnerable areas or like which areas are not neighborhoods are in the less peak canopy, you are not getting there because air temperatures are aligning more with those needs. And South and West Phoenix stand out for the near-term action. So these areas are combined the higher need for those vegetation. So so what if I conclude the whole thing in one sentence, indicator choice is not just technical, it's a planning decision that affects where scarce climate resilience resources go. So for my research, I want to acknowledge like NSF Anchor and also Department of Energy funded SWIFL for funding all my work my master's thesis. And also I want what this happened. I also presented my work in last year in American Geophysical Union. This research is already submitted in the Almer Climate Journal. This is in the review phase right now. And I want to thank my committee. Dr. Saramir is here for serving my committee and also like for the input throughout this project. I want to also thank my collaborators from NSF and CARB from my lab to collaborate with me in this project. I really learned a lot from them and shaping my research journey too. So these are the differences.
Thank you so much, Maheen. Do you have any questions from the audience? Across all of the different indicators that you evaluated, obviously, like extreme heat is a really big one here in Phoenix, but were there other ones that stood out or maybe shocked you in their representation and how you evaluated them?
So for me, like added 8 indicators from heat because I was not sure that how much the heat treated indicators are like acting together. Are they saying the same thing? So like I have all the indicators. I have 3 types of heat indicators. Like one is surface level, one is heat exposure, air temperature, and one is median radiant temperature. The 3 all are not aligned well each other. They're all are saying same different story. That was most like shocking to me. So I think like the planners are like for example, land surface temperature is very much like easy to get. Like it's like shows the cities like intend to use this kind of indicators which is easy to get. But as you see in my research, not part of the like not desert part of the Phoenix are saying they do need high level of vegetation for reducing heat. But you know this there no one lives, so you are not doing your investments in right way. So that was shocking to me.
Yeah, so of those 3 classes of heat indicators, is there one that stood out as you think the most beneficial for planners to utilize, even if they are maybe more difficult to hold up?
Okay, if I talk about Phoenix, it has to be related temperature. But again, there is no any like I would say perfect indicator that you should follow. The planners just need to be careful what they want to achieve, what's their objective for their visitation, and what indicator or what mapping they're using to go there. So you cannot use LST and say I'm reducing the temperature. So for Phoenix, because you know barren lands like also producing that kind of surface level temperature. So if I go through that Phoenix, it should be MRT or like air temperature, not the land surface temperature.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all so much for listening to all of our student work over the course of this evening. We do have a few program thank yous that we would like to get through very quickly. First, an acknowledgement of all of our planning workshop clients, the City of Phoenix, the City of Kingman, ASU Sustainable Cities Network, and Project Cities. Our capstone, our applied project clients, inclusive of Valley Metro and the City of Chandler. Our thesis committee members overseeing our 2 thesis projects, as well as our planning advisory board members who are here today. Thank you all for your assistance and guidance in our program. And our program sponsors for this past year, Snell and Wilmer, the American Planning Association Arizona chapter, the Nature Conservancy, the Arizona Research Center for Housing and Economic Solutions, and ASU Project Cities. Without all of you and our students, this work would not be possible, and we're so incredibly grateful for you all. And lastly, a big congratulations to all of our graduating students. We're all so incredibly proud of you and are very anxious to see what you're going to do with your very successful careers. So congratulations.